And 3. Hi, everyone. My name is Shoshana Goldstein-Nissenbaum. I'm a Toenet Rabbanit, a halachic advocate, and a mediator. Welcome to my podcast, Divorcing with Dignity. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is no legal or emotional, psychological advice. Today, I'm welcoming you to part 2 of co-parenting with a narcissist, together with Jeff Friedman. Jeff Friedman has a very impressive resume with a well's worth, a treasure house of experience and education. He has an MSW from Rotzweiler School. He then continued his education here in Israel by becoming one of the first mediators, right? That was like the baby generation of the mediators, the concept of mediation, and he has many, many other courses in dealing with trauma. And he works today in private practice as a mitzaim hori, which is a parenting coordinator or a parenting mediator, someone who specializes in mediating between parents. The family court in Jerusalem depends on him a lot to take their highest conflict cases and hopefully get the parents on the same page. So we're picking up from our conversation in our part 1 of co-parenting with a narcissist, which I highly recommend. Jeff, we got amazing feedback from it, and more questions, a lot of questions, and please feel free to send your questions to us, and we'll try to answer them in future podcasts. So we left off last time, we were talking about Jeff's 20 commandments, right? It couldn't compact them into 10, it's 20. So there's 4 tablets. So today we're going to do tablet number 1. Well, hopefully we'll get through 5 of them, discuss them. I have a lot of questions, about how to really implement them. And I just want to remind everyone that the goal here is that as parents, we always want to do what's in the best interest of the child. So the best interest of the child is in the forefront of our mind, and we want to make our decisions. And it's really easy to get sidetracked, especially when you're dealing with a narcissistic co-parent who just drains all of your energy, as they did in the marriage, and now they're doing it in a different way, drains all your energy just to stay focused on, wait a second, what's me, what's them, where do I put my boundaries, yes, no. It's a constant conflict which wears somebody down. So the more we focus on what is our goal is the best interest of the child, determining what the best interest of the child is, and acting upon that. So we're ready to hear the first 5.
Okay. I sent it to you, and if it's helpful, Shoshana, because you also looked over and there were questions.
Yeah, should I read them?
Yeah, perhaps if you could read them, and then we could decide. And I would suggest, because of your experience and our dialogue here, what is elicited in you. You know, the clientele and perhaps the listening audience. What is evoked in you, and what questions you have based on these initial 5, and I'll respond to your input.
Okay, great. So commandment number 1, don't speak badly about my other parent in front of me. I am a part of you both, and it makes me feel split inside when you do, and badly about part of myself. So my question to you was, I think that everyone agrees that we understand that the child feels they're part of their parent. But what should I do as a parent when my child comes home from a visit with their father or their mother, right? And the child complains about certain toxic behaviors, borderline abusive behaviors from the other parent or their family, right? For example, mom yelled at me and told me I'm as stubborn as my father, okay? Or here's another example. Dad told me that I'm a jerk or called me another name. A child goes back to their father's house and says, Mom wouldn't give me dinner because I came in late from playing with my friends. Here's another one that I hear all the time from parents complaining to me. What do? Dad said that the court or the Beit Din is going to ask me which parent I want to live with. And they told me to say them. So what do we do? how are we supposed to explain to the child that that behavior is inappropriate or unacceptable, at the same time not diminishing the image that the child has of the parent, and thus diminishing the image the child has of themselves?
Excellent question. And of course, the topic of our topic here is about narcissism. And as we spoke about in our last discussion, that the very nature of narcissism is the difficult, or the tzimtzum, the contraction of being able to appreciate, speak about the other without it being self-referenced. Always self-referencing with a narcissistic personality, excuse me, their needs will always come first. And again, there's a spectrum of that until you get really to personality disorders, which only means that it becomes permanent. It's entrenched, permanent, part of the ongoing personality, as opposed to acute episodes in life when people necessarily go inward and do reference their wounds, but that they can emerge out of them. That's a healthier, but and as I said, there's also healthy narcissism. It just means a kind of approach to the self, to myself. What's a self-interest? What's a healthy sense? Now, when we're talking about children, the obviously the idea is to protect them from the splitting that will necessarily happen when they're exposed to parents who are in some kind of conflictual dynamic, and the parents need to, even healthy, even non-narcissistic parents, or need to know how to check themselves. So as I mentioned, there are, in the United States, there are states that demand workshop hours, a bunch of hours of training how to co-parent. And these Esrima Dibrot, these commandments really are based on the way you read it, and it's intentionally written that way. It's what the child needs to communicate to both parents. Leave me out of this mess. I don't want to be involved in adult issues. I don't want to hear negativity. I have to live between two homes. I have to love, receive. I don't want to be accessed and used as part of your conflict. And there needs to be a training of what happens when you're triggered, because you can't expect all couples that are divorcing, and most of the time that can do this, the conscious uncoupling that you used last time, that term you used. So
but let's say I'm doing what I'm supposed to, right? I want to be respectful of my ex. I want to talk nicely about my parent, and the child is coming home and complaining that and mentioning things. They're not in danger, right? They're not in physical danger, but they're saying, like I said, Abba punished me and didn't give me supper, right?
Yeah.
Because I did X, Y, and Z. Now, in my book, again, maybe you feel different, but I don't think withholding food or supper, maybe withholding treats, but withholding supper is not a fair and appropriate punishment for a child, right? Not to have dinner, right? Maybe not to have dessert, right? But no food. To me, that would be inappropriate. Or, mom called me a name. Mom told me I'm as stubborn as my father.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I now detox the child, tell him that it's okay, and nobody can talk to him like that, and nobody has a right to talk to him like that. But at the same time, I need to be respectful to the father.
Yeah. Very complicated issue you're talking about. So first of all, of course, the child should not have that kind of treatment. But what some of the studies done on kids in conflictual situations is that sometimes it's hard to know exactly what the kids are pulled into manipulative behavior at times. I'm not saying all kids, but often they already sense the emotional, psychological orientation toward the other parent, and they're going to say things about the experience with the other, that'll even exaggerate the negativity so that the other parent will get this kind of secondary delight that they're such an awful parent. That's already
Wow.
that's already a
So that's already the child is very involved, deeply involved.
that's already a sign of damage. That's already a sign. Now, right, and you should be a little bit aware about the extent that kids give those kind of messages, and you have to check yourself if you're the healthier parent. If you consider yourself the healthier parent,
we're always the healthier parent.
We're always the healthier parent. Excellent.
No question about that.
You know, are our kids responding to something that we also feel, and they're reinforcing it, and they're getting some kind of reinforcement by saying that. Now, that doesn't mean the thing didn't happen. We don't know. The ideal situation is if we're talking about really narcissistic disorders, it gets just more problematic. And you really do need a helping person, a third entity there. It's going to be too problematic to do this by yourself if somebody's impossible. If your ex is impossible to work with, you're going to need help. And you need help for the sake of the kids. And you're going to need to have it better managed. And we spoke earlier that we're really talking about levels of management here, better management, because we don't want to delude ourselves into thinking there's this perfect solution. You must talk about educational standards, what parents are expected to do in order to enable their child to have a healthier experience between them. The parents need to go to a parental coordinator, a therapist that will say, no, we'll give them these kinds of guidelines, which is, don't speak badly about the other parent, about the family. You should have an agreement between each other that if a child complains about the other parent, that you both agree as parents that they need to directly speak to that parent. Now, I understand from
the child should directly speak to that parent.
The child should not recruit the parent to you have to encourage the child. Of course, I understand there are situations where the other parent is nasty or abusive or something, right. And that's already a whole other ball game. What you do with that is you have the social services to deal that could be helpful, or a counselor. Otherwise, you really, you're not going to have any access. You need some access so that the person, the ex-partner, gets the message that and gets hadracha, gets guidance, how to act better. And there are people that depending on the level of narcissism, that are very hostile even toward anybody entering their space. Right? The narcissist wants absolute control.
Right. Or what the narcissist sometimes will do is be super respectful to the social services, sit there and nod everything, look like the great parent who's participating, and walk away and just do the same thing they were doing before.
Right. So in case
is a certain, like, it's a way of even torturing the healthier parent, who then looks like a fool for making all his or her complaints.
Right. So the difficult cases that I get in the court, I'm assigned to really follow by. I'm very deeply involved in their dialogue via WhatsApp. They don't speak to each other. If they could come in, not all could sit in the same room together. I try to have that initially, certainly as an assessment. It's better if they can, but often after after a period of time, you're going to begin to identify the parental patterns that repeat itself. So it's not like when they go to social services where you have one meeting. If there really is a problem, the person, the therapist or the social worker or the private therapist needs to have a period of time to witness, assess, and experience the problems that
something that the public social service system does not have.
it's a chaval. There's such a lack yeah, there's which leaves people very very you know
I think it
very
goes back to what you were saying before. It's management, or maybe in my more negative words, damage control.
yeah,
Trying to reduce
absolutely
collateral damage,
right.
and being realistic about what your expectations, right? I often say to a lot of my clients, there's a reason why you got divorced, because you couldn't live with this person.
Right.
You could not
Yeah.
continue to live with this person. So now that you're divorced, it's not really going to change so much in terms of coordinating, parenting, whether it's technical things, and definitely when it comes to chinuch and education and emotional welfare of the children. You were on the same page when you're married. That like you were in different books. That's why you got divorced. So things are not going to be easier now in terms of that. You'll have other things that will be easier and relief in certain matters, but in terms of coordinating with the children, I think it's one thing that parents don't realize when they're divorcing is that they're actually losing a lot of control, because
Yeah,
you're not around 24/7 and you
absolutely.
have to let go,
Yeah.
because what happens in Ima's house is what goes on in Ima's house, and what happens in Abba's house is what goes on in Abba's house. So, I did a divorce many years ago, where the parents, when they were married, they were on I think it's called a macrobiotic diet, which is a very, very specific diet, and they fed the children only these things. Like, there was no ketchup in the house, there was no sugar for sure, and organic, and that was very, very important to them. I actually had this twice come up and one of the parents wanted in the divorce agreement that the other parent should sign that they will not bring in any sugar, any white flour, any non-organic produce into the house and not feed it to the kids. And they're like, no, it's my house. You're not going to tell me what to feed the kids in my house. And they could, like, it stalled the whole mediation process, because they could not come to this. Well, one of them could. The other one could not come to this place that what happens in Ima's house is in Ima's house. What happens in Abba's house is in Abba's house.
Yeah. And you're not even talking about an abusive situation
Right,
necessarily,
right.
which is
Well,
which really,
my
yeah.
kids would say no ketchup is abusive, but that's okay.
Very good. That's like it's like a religious issue. Somebody's religious and not religious. Their religion was macrobiotic cooking, and which involves a lot of time and a lot of and any. So you're talking about ideological differences, dogmatic differences. What is, and this really is the line. What is considered reasonable? What's reasonability? Sechel yashar. What's reasonable?
Right.
And what's fair? What's reasonable? So this is all great for reasonable people or a reasonable dynamic. When things are not reasonable, and when we talk about narcissism, when you're entering that domain, oh Lord, you're in a very, very different place.
Because the
And
flexibility that doesn't exist.
it doesn't exist, and you really, for the parent who feels healthier and is healthier and fine, they're going to be in a very problematic place, because they feel as if they're endangering their child by allowing them to be with the other parent. And that also has to be assessed, because I've met parents who feel that they're the healthier parent, whatever that might mean, but they were very rigid. There was a rigidity, and they couldn't accommodate differences that were maybe not great, but it wasn't terrible either. But they couldn't see that it was exaggerated. So that's why I always say the parent who considers themselves healthy, because sometimes rigidity becomes even though you could be rigid about good things, the partner that felt macrobiotic cooking is briut, is health, is the highest values, yet their rigidity was not a sign of flexibility and what was needed for an accommodation of their kids. I had one kid his father was a vegan, and he started, his rebellion was eating hamburgers, And it was like, you wouldn't believe it was like somebody off the derech, some of these
but to
issues.
them, that's how it is. Like it's their holy cow. Like it is their, that's what it is. So
Yeah.
when you take someone, the more, that's what I find, the more narcissistic you get, the more holy cows you have, the more untouchable topics. It has to be like this. The children must, and a big issue that also comes up is medication, where you have one parent who feels the child should be on medication, and the other parent who's completely against any Ritalin, anything. And very often they both have very valid points, but usually the parent who's coming from not an ideological place, but from a narcissistic place, will give themselves away when they won't listen to the professionals. Meaning you'll have a psychiatrist and a neurologist and the teachers in the school who say this child needs medication, and you'll have one parent who says, no, I don't believe in medication. Right? So you homeschool the kid, like that. And they'll say, yes, fine, I will homeschool a child. Because it's not ideal, it's not an ideology, it's a personal issue. And I find that the court and the social services actually do pick up on that. When they see that a parent is not willing to change their parenting style at all, not willing to listen to the professionals, unhumble, right, in terms of thinking they're a perfect parent and they know everything, those are the parents who come out not looking good in the social service reports, even if they are the healthier parent. But sometimes the narcissistic parent knows how to play the system, because they want to keep up their image, they want to look good, but tachlis, the parent who's not able to adjust, it comes up. It elicits a lot of red flags.
Well, my experience with the courts and with issues around, sometimes I think I mentioned this, that in this profession called parental coordination, tiyum hori, by the courts, sometimes you're given really hard cases, samchut hachra'a, it's called, judicial powers.
Yeah.
And those are the harder cases. And believe me, I'm not pleased, even though it empowers you. They're the hardest cases. You're going to be the enemy of someone. But I always...
It's basically taking away the parenting rights from the parents.
Correct. You're disempowering. It's a continual process of disempowering parental judgment and parental powers.
Which generally they brought upon, I mean, I hate to be harsh, but often at least one of them brought upon themselves by being completely inflexible and unreasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's not always both parents who do that, right? But when you could have even one parent and they're in essence losing their rights over their child because of their inflexibility.
So, a way to be, if we were looking for helpful management tools. So I would say to people who have partners like this, their parental partners that are rigid around certain areas, narcissistic around certain areas, that you might have to imagine, sometimes I've said this to couples, certainly in mediation, you have to imagine if it would go to court, what would the judge say? And often the judge would say, choose a professional in that domain, right, that will. So in other words, even though I'm assigned with powers, I would say I'm not going to make the judgment about Ritalin. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor, but I want you to give me two names. Each give me a name of a doctor that you trust, and you'll do an interview process. And that doctor, whatever they say, if we'll agree upon merosh, any medical issue that will come, they will give their response, and you have to go with what they say. And this way, you get out of the whole dynamic of the discussion, and you assign. And you can have that with schools. If there are people that both can, experts that both people can agree upon, then that's a very important mediative tool
In
to have.
the agreements, in the mediation agreements that I make, we assign for medical, if there's going to be a dispute between the parents on a medical issue, the parents will turn to, usually it's the family doctor,
Right.
and he will be the ish makriya. He will decide if they have a dispute about where the child should go to school. They're going to go to this person. If the child, if one of the parents feels the child needs private lessons, we are going, and we're having a dispute about that, we're going to go to this specific person. For therapy, psychological, psychiatric evaluations, that's another person. And we build that. Those couples though who sign on mediation contracts are usually not the couples who end up by you, that's for sure.
Right.
The couples that end up by you are couples who can't even agree on a person that they'll go to if they have a disagreement.
Yeah.
Which, on the one hand, as a parent, you have to protect your kid. You can't just agree to anything. What I was thinking as we were talking, this came out a lot during Corona, where you had a lot of parents who were anti-vaxxers and a lot of parents who were on the other side, and they're like, no, the child is getting the vaccine now. And there were endless court cases about this. I was involved in a few, and it was interesting how it evolved, because I remember one of the cases, the father comes to me and is like, if my children get vaccinated, they're gonna die, and whatever. I'm not giving my opinion, I'm just saying he was very, very passionate anti-vaxxer. Right. And I remember asking him, like, do you drink Coca-Cola? And he's like, yeah, all the time. And I'm like, okay, so, maybe you could be a little bit flexible on this. Like, if he was someone who, like, this was, a baseline for me. Like, if you're natural, like if it would have been the microbiotic mother, right, who said, I don't want my kids having a vaccine. I hear that. That's an ideology. That's a way of life. But here it was like, let me find something else to argue with my ex about, right? So I'll drink Coke and eat cold cuts and drink Excel, right? And all those power drinks and whatever. But I don't want my kids to get vaccinated because I don't believe in science all of a sudden. Yeah. So if that's how you live your life, Beseder, I understand he has a point and it has to be discussed. The parents have to come to a conclusion. But if that's like you only pop up out of the hole when there's something to fight about, that's the sign of something.
It's also the sign that the parent, the narcissist, could use that as a symbol of showing as if they care more about the
exactly
child.
They care more about the child. They all of a sudden, and they have something, it's about them, right? It's not actually about the child, it's about their beliefs and their bandwagon.
So you have, right. So we right. Go ahead.
What would the expectations be of co-parenting with that kind of parent?
Right. Well, we always come we in this format of talking about narcissistic parents, doesn't matter what the issue comes up, it's always this it's not only a difficult parent, the person who's healthier, the parent doesn't want to speak or engage with that other parent.
Absolutely not, because that's the rule number one in dealing with the narcissist is not engaging with them.
Not engaged.
But you have to.
But you have to. So there are strategies. Okay. And that requires some education as well. I mean, there are books written. There are strategies of how to respond to a narcissistic partner, and that involves a kind of manipulative, strategic writing. What does that mean? Why do I use the word manipulative? Because if you believe in the goal is for the better of the child, and you're the healthier side, you believe you're the healthier side, and you're dealing with a narcissistic parent who is wounded, really, they're just compensating for all kinds of deficiencies in their sense of self, and it became part of their character, and they're desperate for feeling valued because they feel undervalued, and you become their competitor, you become So you have to.
Right.
These are deeper kinds of discussions, but it's because it's like a psychological.
Let's just stop there for a minute, because that's a
Okay.
huge thing to recognize.
Yeah.
That when you divorce from a narcissistic parent, you're now their competitor, which means you are their number one enemy. Like, if the kids love me, then they don't, the narcissistic parent thinks that the kids love the healthier parent, then they don't love them. There's no loving both.
Right.
Wow.
Right. There's no ability to accommodate other. It's a totality. So if you're healthier and you have flexibility, you're able to understand the depth of the problem. You may have to relate that there's you may have to come to the conclusion there's a handicap in my system here. My ex is, for me, is a it's like a machala. It's like a nechut. It's like
a disability.
It's a disability. How do I work with with this kind of disability? And when I said the word manipulative, I mean it. When you get into strategies, you have to get strategic. So you have to say, I have to develop a strategy of communication. The person needs to feel from me that they're valued and important. I need to find a way to compose a letter around a ritalin or whatever it might be in a way that makes them feel I am acknowledging them. I'm not putting them down. I'm incorporating them into the parental. I'm communicating to the narcissistic parents that I value them as an equal parent with power, and therefore find a way to say, I think this would be the best approach. Wouldn't you agree? Or what are your thoughts? I'm ambivalent about this. What would be better? And these are actually strategic. They're not natural. It's not natural to communicate like this.
It's not natural, especially when, there is definitely a lot of baggage there.
And there's so much baggage there. And it requires...
It's exhausting. One thing I tell my clients, whenever you're communicating with your ex, you talk to them as if you are working in customer service and they're the clients, the most annoying, I think they call it Karens, right? They're this really annoying Karen, but you work in customer service and you have to, the customer's always right, service with a smile, although, always be polite, but technical.
Very important what you're saying, because I use a different, you're having a business relationship with.
Exactly. Business relationship.
And when you have a business relationship, you have to have a win-win, that the business survives well and thrives, but it requires rules.
Right. There has to be ground rules.
There have to be ground rules in how you communicate, so that the business, and I'm trying to find something I have here that
there's this great app. I think we spoke about it in our last session also, My Family Wizard, which is in Israel now in Hebrew.
Our Family Wizard, right? I think
Our
it's
Family Wizard, yeah.
Yeah.
Our Family Wizard. Very cheap, very great app, which it doesn't eliminate all the need for communication between the parents, but it definitely helps a lot.
It helps a lot.
Kinds of conversations, like should a child go on Ritalin, or a child is going up in school, they're moving to middle school or high school, that's going to be a conversation. That has to be. It could be in WhatsApp.
Yeah, it's usually in text on Our
right.
Family.
And but it can't be. It can't be like it can't be an automated. It has to be a dusiach, a conversation between the parents.
It has to, and really WhatsApp and digital texting is a wonderful tool for that. You don't have to directly speak if it's too loaded, and if it's too uncomfortable, and if it just triggers too quickly.
Which in most of these cases it is. Just even seeing a name on the WhatsApp, and then there also has to be rules for that. Like I had a client who was getting like 15 WhatsApps from his ex a day, right? It would be like, 9 o'clock in the morning and she's already sent 15 WhatsApps.
Yeah.
Right. So we had to talk, I had to talk to her lawyer and say, look, we have to have ground rules. Either they're going to communicate through a third party, which is going to cost both of them money,
Right.
or there's like only important, very important emergency things.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't need a reminder to put, you know, the sandwich in the kid's bag.
Exactly. It's and, you know, and those usually you know, that has to do with the separation processes sometimes, because you'll find one partner is clinging and dependent and really wants something beyond whatever they want something emotional.
Right.
They're
Right.
and they're
That's the narcissistic part, that it's about me. It's not
yeah,
about the kid. It's not about the
correct.
kid having his sandwich. It's about me putting in my 2 cents and having control over what's going on in my child's life.
So let's say when we're talking really about this whole domain of narcissistic parents, it's exhausting. It's very,
Yeah.
it's exhausting. It's so difficult. And you really need to slow down and say, wait, that's why I say it's a handicap. Relate to it as a loss of the ideal, the idealization of how things should be. And and really, if you're adaptive and a little more flexible and taking a smarter position, you have to say, okay, the good part about, I wouldn't say good part, but maybe the easier part about having a narcissistic ex is that it'll be very patterned and predictable. Their reactions will be patterned and predictable, and you need to use that in order to strategize how best to respond. You have to translate that into understanding, like cues, preemptive cues, and how to translate that into, if you can,
When
into
you say
ways.
that, see, that's interesting, because I always thought of, you know, people with, the more narcissistic they get on the spectrum, and the more, you know, personality, as we get closer to personality disorder, that the only thing to predict about them is they're unpredictable and they're consistently inconsistent. Like they could be, you know, sweet and nice at 1 minute and be, oh yeah, sure, of course, I love you. You're my child's father. You're my child's mother. You're, you know, of course, I'll help you out. And then the next minute they'll stab you in the back by, you know, telling the child, you know, your mother or your father is, you know, a loser, or they're incapable. They hate you. They told, you know, I've had parents who their kids come home and tell them, oh, mommy told me that you told her that you hate me, or that
Yeah,
you didn't want me, right? That
yeah,
you didn't want me.
right.
And like, okay, whether the parents said it or not, I don't know. But you know, that damage is done. And that parent a couple minutes beforehand was saying, oh yeah, sure, like I love you. And it's
Well,
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
I understand, but if you're the healthier parent, say, there was a reason you got divorced. That won't be new. That kind of
Right. Absolutely.
emotional swing or psychological swinging will that you'll it may pull you in and you get very, very angry with that. It's understandable. But if you pull out for a minute, you'll say, oh, I've this is not new to me.
In other words, they cycle. You're
They
saying that
cycle. That's the
they
pattern.
cycle, and the cycle is predictable. So if you
The,
keep a journal, you know
yeah,
their triggers.
you
I don't
have
even
to
know if
be
you need a
aware.
journal. If you write
The
down
problem
like
the
here,
problem
like
is when you get pulled into your own pattern with it, and then you become just you're just recycling your own patterns and you don't even see it. You just get so vulnerable and hurt, understandably. But so you know, you need a degree of self-awareness and practice. It's so much work. It's so unfair because you really have to give a lot of chemla, you have to give a lot of
yeah.
compassion to people who are in this kind of situation.
It's exhausting. It's completely exhausting.
Exhausting, and you need to, and you're going to hear professionals say, hey, it's exhausting, but you need more skills. And that's what, and thank you. You know, but that,
Okay, it's really
that
you know, I think about my son. I have 3 sons in the army. One, Baruch Hashem, who's not in active service right now, and my fourth son. I took him to the recruitment office last week. He's going in too soon. So one of my sons, he was in Gaza for a long time, and he's sleeping an hour and a half a night. and he's dealing with these enemies, and you got to be on your toes, and you got to predict. And the Hamas has our guidebooks. They found them. They found top secret, all our maneuvers they know, right? So, it's unbelievable what they're up against, what our boys are up against. And it kind of reminds me of these parents who they got to constantly be on their toes. The more narcissists they are, the more they really understand and know the weak spots of their, as you said, enemy, opponent, right, competitor, and they're going to hit them.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting, and you have to tell to a healthy parent, you must be resilient. You must build your resilience in all aspects of your life. Get good relationships, come out, emerge, do physical exercise, do all the things that we know to and there are exercises to do when you get triggered by the narcissistic parent. You must stop and say, "Oh, I recognize this poison coming up in me, this anger, this rage." You pause. You do a pesach zman. You take a time out. You breathe. These are physical things to help you get out of the stressful patterns of reaction that you'll be pulled into the toxicity of these interactions.
And that's maybe the best way to offset the narcissistic parent, is by not reacting.
Very good. That's a very super important point that you're raising. That's right. But then you could see the over-involved parent. Now there could be an abreaction to this narcissistic parent. The parent who's healthy feels like they have to overhelp their child sometimes.
Right. Overcompensate.
And it's very painful to tell the parent, "Now, you know something? The court still designated this narcissistic parent as a viable co-parent. It's not to deny your chashashot, but you have to make room. But my child will be damaged. The child may need help. The child may need help to understand how to manage and understand this other parent. You can't protect them entirely now. Like you were saying earlier, we lose control. The parent loses control. As the child develops, they'll recognize they may need help. They may need therapy and another therapist for the kids, right?
Right. And hopefully the narcissistic parent won't sabotage that therapy.
And hopefully it won't. And you may have a court order that it has to be done. And but it could be, the school could be helpful at times, as Yoet said. I don't know the kind of school systems that people have but there are.
Most schools have a Yoet, so Yoet said.
Yeah, so sometimes they're going to pick up the kids, things the kids say and feelings, and they'll give feedback to the kids, and that could be a guiding post to both parents. Again, that's why I prefer, when we talk about narcissism, to look at it as a spectrum.
Right. We keep saying that's very important, because there's the full-blown personality disorder, and then there's, we all kind of slip in and out to narcissistic behavior.
Yeah.
Which maybe we want to call a selfish scale, but
So I think that the child will grow up with this other parent, and they need to know they need to know how to work with this other parent over time. The child is younger, it's more problem. It's harder for the other parent just to let go. The best is if they can really find guiding posts. If the healthy parent really needs to learn good skills, when to not enter a fight, what's the battle worth fighting, how do you identify a subject that is problematic and find ways to talk about it, not to get it global, not to go through the laundry list of focus on one thing at a time. You're talking about Ritalin, talk about Ritalin. You're talking about the child complaining about what's going on. You say, when the child is complaining, should we communicate to each other? Should we have a directive to the child saying, when you have a problem, we both parents agree that you talk directly to the other parent. If we parents hear something from the other child will inform the other parent without accusation.
Right.
Without accusation.
That's a hard one, without accusation. That's
hard one.
That's a hard one. It basically like contain it. Contain each issue.
Yeah.
In order to maintain it, it's got to be contained.
Correct. Well said. And it rhymes. And yes. Absolutely. And you know, how do you get to a place where we agree upon? So, you know, earlier about the principles of conducting a business-like a relationship. So, you know, you both need commitment for the business, for the partnership, and the commitment would be, of course, the health of the child. Commitment that we both, that's how we there's a win-win situation. How do we create this into a win-win? Of course, I know, you know, when we talk about narcissism, oh my God.
Because by a narcissist, there is, if there's win-win, then it's not a win for me. If somebody else wins, then it's not a win for me. So there's no win-win with them. It's my way or the highway.
Yeah. So, you know, when we really, so you have to have a baseline first. That's why I say this discussion about narcissism, before you get to narcissism, what's the baseline of healthy co-parenting?
Right.
And once you have a baseline, at least you'll have something to go toward, at least to conceptualize what's healthier. And then that could be a frame of reference. You need a frame of reference. You need
that makes a lot of sense, because you have a lot of these parents, even the healthy parent who's been in a relationship with someone on the narcissistic spectrum doesn't really know what healthy co-parenting is, because even when they were married, they might have lived in the same house, but they weren't there. It wasn't an alignment. It was either walking on eggshells or being beaten, or not necessarily physically, but, you know, emotionally, in a very controlling environment.
They could have had a parallel parenting situation while they were married. It was like
that would be good already, right? That would be good. But many of them had very, very poor within the marriage. It was the communication was poor. It was either, you know, I'm just going to be silent and I'm going to live a tear, right? I'm going to give in, give in, give in. I'm always walking on eggshells. And then now we're separated. I don't even know what healthy communication means. So I think that's important to get that baseline, get that vision of what would healthy co-parenting look like. And then say, okay, but this is what I can do, and this is what's not going to happen.
Right. And then things, you know, come up so spontaneous. So you were describing before how there's this overwhelming nature of the anger or the self-interest of a narcissistic parent who's just motivated to win. And then the flooding of the system doesn't make it any easier. So you have to know, in a normative situation, normative more or less, with people who are in pain but divorcing,
right,
who are reasonable,
right,
they'll identify, we have kids, we got divorced, we want them to be well, we're committed to their well-being, to making the best kind of decisions together. We're focusing on issues that will come up. We're not interested in being best friends. We have a functional business that we need to run. We've divided assets. We've figured out who's responsible monetarily. All these things that are reasonable, right?
And I've had many couples like that.
Fantastic.
They come for mediation.
Yeah.
And, you know, I say to them, okay, let's get a child psychologist in on this. And it's not necessarily classic collaborative divorce, but they agree on a therapist. They go, not usually together, every other week, you know, they switch off, and they have great divorces. And I mean, you don't want to say great divorces, maybe it's an oxymoron, but
not at all. No. That's a great. That's important to introduce that concept.
Yeah.
In this line of work, that there are good processes. There are good processes, and that means you're retaining a kind of basic respect. You're not doing character assassinations.
Right, not at all. There are parents like that who divorced.
Yeah,
They're just, look, it didn't work out between the two of us. You know, sometimes it's a religious issue. One of them wants to become religious, more religious. One of them doesn't want to be religious anymore.
yeah,
And I've seen religious things, or just some, like, they just, you know what, we liked each other as 20-year-olds. We don't love each other as 30, 40-year-olds. Like,
right, correct.
you know, you're a nice person, but we just, you know, it's not like they fight that they can go to couples counseling to resolve issues. There is no marriage there. There's no bond between them. There's nothing
Right.
to, but they're very rational, good people, healthy people, I should say.
Right.
And they're interested in just what's the best thing for the kids. So those couples usually end up in a collaborative style divorce, where a professional is brought in, and they listen to the professionals, and they're honest about themselves, and they're willing to.
Very important word, honest, because when you're talking about serious narcissism, is often a total fabrication of reality.
Absolutely.
And a distortion. And you really need help. The healthier parent needs help from a third party.
Because that narcissist will come to court, will come to the family services.
Absolutely.
And they will, like, what do you complain? Like, it's so hard to pick up on a narcissist unless they completely expose themselves, which I did have that once in court, which I
have a feeling over time. That's why I say, when the court, in my experience, when a judge, for instance, is on a case for a few years, they'll see all the issues that come up, they'll get already an impression, and that's an advantage when you have the public bodies that deal with the case. If they're in it for a long time, they'll know but
to be in it for a long time, that means that the healthier parent has made a very difficult decision to keep fighting, per se, on certain issues, when, you know, weighing the damage between giving in to the narcissistic parent or the damages of long-term litigation, which is tremendous to the children. So it's a very heavy decision. But I just want to tell you, I have a really great story where I had this court case where, you know, it's interesting because a lot of times I have a client who will come and they will say, you know, my spouse is a narcissist. Okay. And then I have clients who come and describe behavior. They don't have the word, like they're just like, this is what happens in my house. And my mind is going off, oh my gosh, this is such narcissistic behavior, but they won't use the word narcissist. It's not in there. Like, no, my spouse is not a narcissist. Like, narcissists are like crazy mass murderers, sociopathic people. They don't realize that there's a spectrum, right? So I had a client who came to me and she described like horrible behavior in her spouse. And we stood before the court. Wasn't interested in negotiating. We stood before the court and she told the court some stories about some very abusive incidents which happened. And the court, the Dayanim looked at him and they said to him, you know, the stories that this woman just told, and I coached her before, and do not say he's abusive. Just tell the stories. Say the date when it happened.
Be descriptive.
But don't label. That's the judge's part, to label. Your job is to tell the story.
Right.
And I coach all my clients to do that. We never label people because we're not psychologists and we're not psychiatrists.
That's right.
We can describe behavior.
Yeah.
So they started asking him questions about the details. Did it happen? Did you do this? Did you say this? And at one point, he was standing next to the wall, and he's standing up, and he starts pounding on the wall. Ani lo alim, ani lo alim. I'm not abusive. I'm not abusive. And he was having a temper tantrum, like that they were asking him questions. And one of the Dayanim burst out laughing. One of them got up and just forget it, you know. And the other one started yelling at him that he better give his wife a get. But that's very rare that an abuser would expose himself on such a level, because usually they're in control.
Yeah, I've had cases where the narcissistic parent actually tried to go back and create false accusations, and they got caught. They made up
That
horrific
happens
accusations,
all the time. The
and
false accusations
yeah,
are unbelievable.
yeah,
And often the courts don't even pay attention to them because they realize, okay, there's nothing here. Even though it's hard for me to understand that even when I'm on the other side, because if a parent says this about their spouse, then you have to take it seriously or at least investigate it. But sometimes they don't even look into it. And sometimes the opposite. They make a big deal out of it, and it
I
takes a
mean,
long time.
look, sometimes the accusations could be criminal, and I've
Yeah,
seen things like that too. And then
that
that's a
comes up
different
all the
story.
time. I had a client who lied
Yeah.
to me, and therefore I lied to the court unknowingly.
Mm.
And we got a really hefty fine.
Mm. Wow.
I mean, she's the one who lied, not me, but she had to pay it. When you make
Yeah.
up false accusations and eventually they're exposed,
Yeah.
you have to pay, I think it was 10,000 shekels, lo tzara medina.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So
That's a lot of
I I
money.
I think that one of the distinctions when you're talking about healthy to narcissistic is parents that are, if an issue comes up, when parents are able to stick to the facts of the issue and not address their emotions in relation to the issue, that's a sign of health. The
And that's
non-health,
very important when talking to the court or the
yeah,
family services, is to talk about the facts and not the emotions that come with
yes,
it.
that's right. I always am sure you've had this also. Even the courts, people who are wounded from divorce processes and think that courts or mediation will lead them toward justice. They'll finally get justice. We don't look at it for justice. Don't look for justice in any systems. There's never emotional justice. You must give that up and
That
stick to
is
the
one of the
facts.
most painful things that I have seen with 90% of my clients and it's really hard. And I feel that way myself too sometimes. Like I would like a badge that says I'm right, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Some kind of certificate to hang on the wall, some
yeah,
vindication. And
yeah.
the only place that we're ever going to get it is from ourselves. It's from knowing that we did the best with the tools that we had.
You need a lot of support. You need therapy sometimes. Whoever you need, if you go to a therapist, just to have your own personal story processed in a way that is acknowledged, that you're not expecting outside others to acknowledge some deep, deep wound. You have to be very cognizant of that, because otherwise you'll fight a losing battle. You'll be
Right.
motivated by a need for emotional vengeance and getting back, and that will not serve you. So that's the problem. The other
And
side,
that's getting on the narcissistic spectrum.
yes,
That's the healthier
very
parent
good.
turning more narcissistic because it's about me, not about
That's
my
right.
kids' needs and it's just about me and it's my feelings and it's
Yeah,
my rights. And that
it's
that
very good that you said that, because that's why I said it's a spectrum. That even us, even the healthier people, we all have elements of wounds or uh, emotions or pain that needs acknowledgement. But you think the other parent or the law or someone else is going to know? You have to, yeah.
and definitely not your kids. You
Oh,
definitely don't want to
wonderful.
hear that from your kids.
That's
That's not
right.
a win.
So I
That's
suggest, absolutely, so good you said that. Don't make them into your therapist.
right.
Don't
Or
expect,
your vindication here.
or
The
your
kid said
vindicate.
they want to come to me for Pesach, right? I won.
Yeah, that's the Torah al regalachat. What you just said around. Don't convert them into an emissary of some kind of emotional need you had. I want to say that maybe you want to read. I don't know how much more time we have, But
I
if
think we're overtime.
we're even overtime. So maybe do you want to just read the five, those first five things you could see we could go, and they're written from a perspective where the child is talking to both parents. And at the end, we say, hang this on your refrigerator, parents. And because the child will call you out on it. They have a right. They have a right to their right. The parents need to know the child's have rights. They have to say, I'm going to tell you, parent, if you're going to speak negatively about my other parent, I want to tell you that, and you must stop. And you must tell both parents that the children have a right to tell you that, and that you should listen to them.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's also involving them a little bit, no?
It is, but in cases like that with narcissistic damage, they have to be proactive. They almost have to be trained to be a little proactive in their defense.
Interesting. Like they have to stand up for themselves.
They have to stand up for themselves.
The narcissistic parent is not standing up for them.
That's right. They say, I don't want to hear that about my parent or about her family or her friend. I'm meet with them. I have to love my grandparents. Leave me alone. Leave me out of this. Yes, you want even the child to have some training in respectful self-protection.
Wow. Okay, so number 2 was don't speak negatively about the family or friends of my other parent. They are my family as well. Let me love whom I need to and want to. Don't make me feel disloyal to you if I don't like them and I do. If you don't like them and I do. Yeah. That was number 2. Number 3, please don't argue in front of me on the phone when I'm around. It frightens me and makes me feel sad and angry. Number 4, this is the big one. Don't ask me to spy on the other parent for you. It makes me feel disloyal to them and bad about myself. Let me have my own relationship separate of you with my other parent. That's really hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard because from my experience, personal experience, my client's experience, everybody wants to know what's going on with their ex.
Yeah.
Just for curiosity's sake, not to do anything with it, just to hear, oh, they got a new television, they got a new car, how's their new spouse, what's going on with them, are they working, did they change jobs, are they going, to the Bahamas for Pesach? Everybody wants to know.
That's why this was written from the perspective,
right?
I need my space, the child says.
Right. And I want to know, why I'm getting, my clients will tell me over and over again, why I'm getting so little child support when he's, going to a hotel, to the Waldorf Astoria for Pesach. Like,
right.
What's the deal with that? So he's going, who's paying for it, right? 5, please don't speak about monies. Here we go. Please don't speak about monies in front of me. It makes me feel responsible for the divorce.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we could go down. We're already over time. We'll have to pick it.
We'll have to pick up again.
We'll have to pick up
because
again.
The money is a big issue. Money is a weapon.
You just should. And often the kids get pulled in to advocate for one of the sides.
Right. Give my mother more money. Why are you're stealing all of Abba's money? Did you steal Abba's money? Right. Your father, he has all this money that he's not giving me. Ask him. I know it. Let me tell you, my kids sometimes ask me for them. The first thing I want to say, ask your father, And you have to bite your tongue sometimes. Yeah. And it hurts, but okay.
So again, these are all of the, the amirot, the sayings that the child, to emphasize the space the child needs to be healthy. And we understand when we're talking about narcissism that these spaces either don't exist, and then is a different intervention, like the kids, depending on their ages, but they need to know they have rights to be out of this conflict. And they need to be instructed. They also need, if the parents are, again, along the spectrum of narcissism, we could end like this, and we could pick it up if there's a need and a desire. We'll talk more about this. But that when both parents could agree on these, even theoretically, on these aseret hadibrot, srim hadibrot, whatever, and the children know about it, and there's a consensus. We have these principles, and then they're guided and instructed, the parents, to say, yes, tell me if I do something wrong, you have a right to your to these things, that already legitimizes and identifies their need to both sides.
And that's a great thing, because if the narcissistic parent is not going to keep any of these, which they're not, right? They're not going to keep the 20 commandments. They'll say they will. They'll swear to the social worker and the social services, and in front of the court they will, but they won't. So this puts the child, and it actually gives the child power to say, we agreed you wouldn't talk about my father, my mother in front of me.
That's right. That's right.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And
thank you.
Good to speak to you. And we'll see if there's a desire for any continuity, and we'll leave it at that. Okay.